Hi, I'm Paul Battaglia, and this is section 3.4, Exponential and Logarithmic Equations. Since there are such a wide variety of equations that we want students to look at, I think it's best if we look at these from a student's perspective. So I have Gabe and Brittany here, and they're going to help us take a look at what the student has to think about in order to master all of these different equations. So Gabe, what exactly, if I'm a student, should I be looking for first?
Okay. So if I'm looking at a logarithmic or exponential equation, probably the first thing I want to determine is, well, which one is it?
Okay.
Is it a logarithmic equation or is it an exponential equation?
Right.
Because once I figure that out, I might have a better idea of how I want to go about solving it.
Okay. And then if I know, let's say now I know it's exponential, I know it's logarithmic. Brittany, what is one of the first things you would look, or at least to tell the students to look for?
To see if we can use the one-to-one properties.
Okay, all right. And so that's something that actually goes back a little bit to what we talked about in earlier sections. So they've had a little bit of exposure to that, and now hopefully that's what they're looking for. Is it 3 to the x equals 9 to the 4x plus 1 or something like that?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, okay, so here I am, I'm a student, and I've tried to use the one-to-one property, but maybe it's 3 to the x equals 5 to the 2x minus 1. All right, now I have problems. So where do I go from here, Gabe?
Oh, maybe you could see if you can use the inverse properties.
Okay, fantastic. Anything else that I want them to be aware of, right? What do I want to be aware of? What could come my way as a student?
Any other properties that we have dealt with logarithmic.
Logarithms and
Okay, so I may have to make sure my students understand. You may have to condense a logarithmic expression first before you try and write it as an inverse or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Fantastic. You know, what we're looking for, I think, now is we've seen this wide variety. So the question becomes, okay, so now I'm a student and I have, at least a minimum of 3 different techniques possibly to try out, and I know what question I'm supposed to ask first, but is there something maybe I can do? Well, maybe we can make a flowchart. And so I think what I would do from the teacher's perspective is I would say, let's answer Gabe's question first. Is the equation I'm looking at exponential or logarithmic? Okay, if we say it's exponential, then naturally what I want is I want the student to tell me all the different techniques that we need to try. Is it one-to-one? Yes, great. If no, okay, what do I do, right? And I want to take that same approach with the logarithmic side as well. But remember, as the teacher, you don't want to fill out the flowchart for them. I mean, it's better if you have 10 or 12 different perspectives, and then maybe as a group, you guys can decide, which one of these is actually maybe the best for mastery. Finally, I think what we want is we want these students to practice. We want them to maybe even use the flowchart, right? To practice some of these examples and make sure that they're trying to master different techniques, and most of all, recognizing which technique to use. So before we finish up, is there anything else that we're leaving out?
Something that you really want to consider is when you're using the properties of logarithms or exponentials, do you end up with any extraneous solutions? So really going back and maybe after you find solutions to your equations, checking that they actually satisfy the initial equation.
There you go.
Or that they're even in the domain of what you're trying to solve.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because you can have situations where the students now are, this section lends itself towards just doing, right? And so now you're solving problems and you get x equals 5 and negative 1, and you don't think anything of it. You just go right to the next problem where, like you said, maybe negative 1 wasn't in the domain. So things that we need to bring up to students, not necessarily overly common, but important nonetheless. So I hope these tips have been helpful and that you find much success in section 3.4.